Hey guys, welcome to another Mr. R show. I'm Ashton.
Andy.
And let's see if me and Andy can conjure up the ghost of Ronald Reagan so we can start a new series, What Is? And our first topic is conservatism.
Yeah.
So, what is exactly conservatism? You hear that word a lot, and let's preface this, or let's say this. First off, me and Andy, when we're doing the series, we're not looking out to vilify any single philosophy or way of thinking. There's many ways you can look at different things and come to perfectly opposite opinions on what to do about the problems in our world. And I feel like people need to try to, when they're coming towards this, with an open mind. That doesn't necessarily, of course, there's a right and wrong with certain things, like you shouldn't commit genocide, but but there's other ways about looking at taxes that's valid to look at, and so we're
hmm
trying to look at these things in an open and fair-minded way. So
Yeah.
just Andy, do you want to kick us off and go through, let's say, the stereotypical definition, what people say a American conservative is? Because that can mean different things across the world.
Yes. I want to just preface again by just saying we are going to be looking at this abstract. We're not going to bring our personal bias into this. We all have our beliefs, whatever they may be, but we're looking at these ideologies and belief systems as just what they are, not what we believe. So let's kick off. Let's get straight into the definition of conservatism. I have it right here with me. According to the dictionary, the conservatism means the holding of political views that favor free enterprise, private ownership, and socially conservative ideas. Pretty basic things there, Ashton. It would make sense. We can get into the belief system in a second. We have just diving into each one what they believe. But when doing the research for this video, learning more about conservatism, I found out there were actually 6 core beliefs of American conservatism that was according to Russell Kirk, who was a very famous writer and conservatist back in the 80s and late 1900s. And his 6 beliefs were transcendent order, social continuity, prescription, prudence, variety, and imperfection. Ashton, before we kick into the actual beliefs of the system, any thoughts about the definition and the 6 core beliefs?
I mean, it's pretty standard stuff. American conservatism has been around for a long time, but it's changed its face a little bit over the last 10, 20, 30, 40 years. It hasn't always stayed the same. I would say, modern Republican conservatism, if you want to give it that term, it really came around kind of in the 70s. I would say late 60s, mid 70s, when you had people like Barry Goldwater running for president, kind of embracing these kind of more some of these 6 core philosophies against some of the more, let's say, liberal candidates at that time.
Yeah, like you were saying, you look at the first, he was not really conservative, but he started changing the trend of the Republican conservatism. You look at Richard Nixon, he slowly started to change that. I think the first conservative president and Republican president was Ronald Reagan. He changed the face of modern, what we think of contemporary conservatism, and it
Hmm.
just bloomed into from the 80s to what it is now in 2016 when Donald Trump being conservatist, if you want to call him that. We're not going to debate that or not, but according to this video, for now, let's just say Donald Trump is a conservatist. So it's a huge difference between when Reagan took office and of course, when Donald Trump is in office. Ashton, let's kick off. Me and we can just take turns, going through some of the belief systems of
Hmm.
conservatism. I will start. The first one, pro-life. Obviously, first thing that comes to mind a lot are the people screaming against abortion, screaming pro-life. They're against the practice of abortion, obviously. Usually, conservatives fight for defunding clinics. They do not want any of their tax dollars going to fund these kinds of clinics and practices. They're a lot more, socially moral and deep in their tradition. Some even call for the reversal of the Roe v. Wade Supreme Court case, which allowed for the legality of abortion in the first place. With a lot of conservatives being religiously Christian, it makes sense for them to be pro-life.
Mm-hmm. Yes, this is one of the tenets that really started to grow within the political right and within conservatism itself. Modern, because clearly abortion hasn't existed until, like, I believe it started somewhere in the 60s, 70s. So it's really become a new issue if you're looking at the longer history of America, and that's definitely I would say one of the tenets that makes it very, very incredibly to run as, let's say, a conservative and not be pro-life. Like, that's how you have to look at these core principles. If you have 5 out of 6, how hard is it for you to run as that? Or if you run 4 out of 6, how hard? And eventually, if you remove enough of those, are you're not really that definitional, or you're not that definition of conservatism.
Yeah, 100%.
Hmm. And next is a limited and small size or role of the federal government. Basically, this is more about focusing on the scope of not necessarily just the function of government, like how many people work in it, but
Mhm.
also the power the government can exert over the states. States' rights is necessarily something that conservatives believe should be a little bit more empowering than, let's say, their liberal counterparts, and they constantly are pushing for that jockeying of power for less federal, or yeah, let's say less federal power and more state power. Now, recently that has been a little bit more in flux. Andy, do you have any comments on that tenant?
No, more of a lot of conservatives believe that outside of the military, which they think government can have, they have the control over, obviously commander in chief and stuff like that. Very much everything else should go to the states and local governments. Stuff like that they want the government to uphold their Christian beliefs, their Christian morals. So that's why a lot of them are against, like we said, they're pro-life. They do not like, a lot of them don't like same-sex marriage, and even drug uses are ones that they do not want. Which is, you look at prohibition as a good example of, the Christian morals that they believe in. That's what their government's job is to uphold those Christian faith, Christian morals, and just the government's job is to protect the rights of the citizens, not to control anything, pretty much.
Mm-hmm.
But let's move on to the money side of the conservatism belief system, and they're very much a private economy. They believe that government interference with financial situations should only be in dire situations like financial crisis, like with the Great Depression and the 2009 crisis with the houses industry. Um,
And recently.
Recently, that too. Like we said, very limited government, which means they favor the role of the private sector when it comes to most economic situations. They call for them to be the problem solvers, to initiate financial stimulation packages, stuff like that. They believe, like a lot of other Americans, this is one of the few things that they have in common with a lot of other belief systems is lower taxes.
Mm-hmm.
That's pretty much across the board. Most people don't like taxes. They want reduced government spending, and decreased debt. All important things for conservatives.
And next, Andy kind of alluded to it, the military. They are very pro-military. They, I would say, ever since Eisenhower, they have kind of idolatrized the military. They have pushed forward, trying to make the military a very patriotic thing. They try to orient towards getting bigger military budgets. They are a little bit more pro-military action in foreign nations. Just general. Um, the military is one of those things where it hasn't necessarily been uh, a big thing conservatives have agreed on. This is a little bit more of a wedge principle that you see a lot of fracturing within the conservative movement. So that's definitely one that when you're talking about like whether you should intervene or not, that's stayed in the political right for such a long time that debate has, and it will continue to be a big issue in the future.
I think this is the one, like the belief, core belief that is a very, you see on the news where a lot of people butt heads with conservatives because many believe, along with the military, that they believe a strong police force. They support their police force along with the firemen and the EMTs are very, very much loyal to them. So when you see things with the Colin Kaepernick situation back a couple years ago when he knelt for the national anthem, that got a lot of people heated in the conservative belief system. They believe that you should always support the military, that that's not a place for protest, and we're not here to debate it. We're here just to tell you they believe in their military. They love their military, and to them, that's just disrespectful for them. You can disagree or agree all day long, but that's just their belief system in that. So it
Mm.
shows why there's always such a huge heated debate right now in the modern times with everything going on with the racial tensions. Moving on to just healthcare, always a big issue with healthcare, due to their feeling towards the government size and the government interaction with the people. They believe in a private system of healthcare. Also, they believe the government offered healthcare like Obamacare is both a waste of money and ineffective in dealing with the problems of healthcare. One thing they have in common, though, with almost all the parties, another thing here is the belief that pharmaceuticals prices are too high. They must be decreased. They have a different way of dealing with it, obviously, but they also agree with pharmaceuticals being too high and an industry that needs to be fixed. Ashton, we went through all the basic beliefs right now. Any more just thoughts and reactions before we move on to just some famous conservatives we can list real quick?
Yes, conservatism itself is a, every principle or every kind of philosophy like this, it will have, it's not generic. Not everyone under the umbrella agrees with the same things. You will have a lot of people agree with five out of the six, and then like every one of the six will be different for every conservative you meet. So you may have one that's everything we listed, but a little bit more for intervening economy. Or you may have a pro-choice but agrees with everything else. So people come in a whole bunch of shades. So people need to be careful or like at least try to be describing a little bit more when they describe what they believe,
Mm-hmm.
because or what they assume when someone says someone is something else. So I want to preface that. And overall, conservatives, I think we all know they are a rowdy bunch. That's not a bad thing, and they definitely make their voice heard.
100%. I think just to echo what you were saying, if you assume that you're talking to a conservatist and they believe in every single thing that we listed, that can cause some tensions. We talked about the race issues. You can
Hmm.
talk about the healthcare system, the military, the police. It causes tensions. You need, with any ideology, you need to sit down with the man, sit down with the woman, just have a conversation with them, see what they truly believe in, and if you think differently, that's okay. That's what makes this country great. We need to have different opinions and be able to hear and respect all differences, not just cancel or silence people that you disagree with.
So some famous conservatives, I think a lot of people are gonna hear a lot of these names. I'll start off with the I would say the most well known or uh, the one that's most looked up to, and that's Ronald Reagan. I think when you say conservative, 99% of Americans will instantly think, oh, that old guy who was an actor who was a good president.
Mhm.
So you have more modern Ben Shapiro, Billy Graham, Bill O'Reilly, Sean Hannity. And if you want to talk about a little bit more historical, Barry Goldwater, I mentioned him, um, very underrated senator, but he was also a presidential nominee in '64 and lost pretty badly. Um, you had people like Ted Cruz, Marco Rubio, Paul Ryan, uh, Sarah Palin. Uh, and as long as you're not Dick Cheney's neighbor, you're good. Uh, that's or if you're not going on a hunting trip with him, you're good. Throw in some jokes. Sorry, my jokes are bad. Mike Pence, George W. Bush. I know again, people aren't going to agree that some of these people aren't conservatives. Well, I mean, they're not going to agree with everything like we stated on the six principles, but they come pretty close and they at least agree with at least 80% of it, 90% of it, different shades. So, uh, like I said, it's a rowdy bunch. So let's get into some myths and lies.
Yes, the one that I do hear a lot, at least when I'm talking out in the world and what I see on any kind of chat group or anything like that, is conservatism leads to fascism, or it's the next step. Ashton, before I just get into my findings, what's your reaction when I say that?
Uh, it's a pet peeve of mine when people on either side say liberals are next step to socialist or communist, and conservatives are next
Hey,
step to
that's a
fascist.
foreshadow, Ashton. That's a foreshadow to our one of our next what is, and that is going to be the liberalism, socialism kind of
Mhm.
topics there. So thank you for that foreshadow, Ashton.
Yeah, it's a very lazy argument when you have nothing else to actually debate on policy wise, or you don't have any better points. Ultimately, conservatism is its own thing. Fascism is actually much like somewhat of socialism, but a little bit different because instead of the state or like the collective group owning the means of production, it's more the state controls it, not controls it. They allow private ownership, but it has to go through the state. So fascism is a definitely interesting mix. That's why they call it National Socialism, and it's definitely not what modern American conservatives generally believe in. At least most of them, of course. Like I said, different shades. You do have those people. We all know them in our life. Those crazy people.
Yeah, like there's a lot of extremists on either side, but we're not here to give light to the extremists. We're here to give light to the belief system. When I hear that conservatism leads to fascism, I just say that is just simply not true. It does not lead to fascism. They're different in their beliefs and their practices. Economically speaking, on the money side of things, fascism involves the government stepping in a lot more than with
Hmm.
conservatism. We've established about the limited government. In fascism, it's not about that. Government is a much more important role, and with them having fascism economies kind of requiring firms and other kind of industries to make and supply a fixed amount, they only receive a fixed amount. So there's a limit to what you can make in fascism economies. Unlike with conservatism, one second, Ashton, conservatism economies, whew, they are all about spend as much of your own capital, make as much money as you want. It's all about you. You look, and that was just huge into capitalism and this system.
Hmm. And conservatism is all about the individual. Fascism is mostly about the group. You are producing for the group, for the collective.
Yeah, 100%. It's all about the individual matters in conservatism, but with fascism, it's the group first, an
Mm.
individual second, like you said. Fascism. Another thing that people forget is that fascism and conservatism has a huge difference in just the way the government works. Fascism has one ruler who is a dictator that controls all, and the citizens are at expense of said ruler, aka Hitler in Germany was a fascist leader. We are not to that level in America. Anyone that wants to say that. We are still elected democracy. In conservatism, they believe in the rights of the people. The people have the right to vote, and the government is there to protect their rights. And if they do not protect their rights, they have said right to overthrow government, set up a new government that will. That's a huge difference. We don't have a dictator in this country, and that is fascism. Conservatism does not believe in dictators.
Yeah, it's just one of those things where I feel like it's a lazy argument by people who want to just. It's easier to call someone a name than it is to debate your point effectively that what they are saying is wrong, or them it's if you get caught in like knowing that you made a bad, let's say, argument, and they say something that proves you wrong, and you're like, oh, you're just a fascist, or you're just a communist. And this is a bad problem in within American politics, is people who don't want to spend the time into looking into these issues, who don't care about educating themselves, at least learning about what they are talking about. Just throw these words around and they don't have any meaning to them, but they have a history behind them. And it's just it's sad to see people stoop that low. I hope people, if you're watching this, if you want to learn more about like conservatism, where it came from, Edmund Burke is a great resource. He's where modern conservatism, by modern I mean like basically past the 16th century and forward. He was a MP in the British Parliament during the 18th century. He's he's a philosopher, and he's the one who basically got like, why don't individuals have rights? Why don't they own their own property? And that's where you started getting these philosophies. And if you want a good read, you can read a philosophy, the founding documents of philosophy, and still learn a lot from one that you don't even agree with. That's why I tell people to read Karl Marx. I know a lot of people will be like, what?
You
But
are
Karl
communist
Marx,
socialist, Ashton.
yeah, it really does teach you a lot about how people thought during that time, and how, you know, governmental theory goes in. Because, ultimately, every government's trying to figure this out, and you gotta, I always like to say, everyone has one thing they are right about. You can find the stupidest person in the world, and they're gonna be right about one thing. So why not try to learn that one thing they're right about? And there are a lot of smart people that don't agree with you. That's just inevitable. So
Yeah.
you want to learn what they have right and fix what you have wrong, because no one has all the answers.
Conservatism, as of right now, is in a crossroads. It's a very weird state of what they want to believe in. It started really modern conservatism, like we said, started with Ronald Reagan, has developed over time, and now it is at a crossroads. Right now, Donald Trump, the president, is a conservative. But you have within their own party, conservative ideology, I mean, not party, you have people like the Lincoln Project that are fighting against Trump. They don't believe that he is up for their conservative beliefs. So you have kind of this fighting within the conservative ideology that we're going to see, in the next coming 4, 5, 6, 7 years, how modern conservatism will change with Trump still in office, without him, after him. We'll see how it changes and where it goes. But thank you guys for joining us today on our first edition of What is Conservatism. We'll be back with another one of these in the coming weeks, but we got more videos we got to push out there. I know we're getting closer to our September map. You guys always like that one. It's August, so we're very, very close to the election. We're very close, guys. But still, stay safe out there. Wear your mask. It's not over yet. And we'll see you guys in the next video.
We are heroes tonight.